And I was always frustrated because I say, hey, why it's more important the company I work for than me as a person? And when I saw after layoffs so many people that were super high in ranking that suddenly were my friends, the websites, the basics. So everything has been extremely difficult for me. And also I didn't want to sell myself. It's easier to sell other people, to sell products, to and not put yourself and say, okay, I am my product. Many times we believe so much in the stories we tell to ourselves that we close doors, that unconsciously we close doors in front of us and we don't realize it, thinking that it's not us.
You just heard a few pieces of my conversation with Katia Triggiani. What I loved about this conversation is that she never pretends that the solopreneur journey is clean or linear. We discussed the very real loss you feel when your corporate title disappears, why marketing yourself is so much harder than marketing a company, and why patience might be the most underrated skill you need to build a solo business that lasts. This is Unfiltered Solopreneur. Enjoy the show. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm your host, Nikhil. My next guest left a high-powered corporate career for a far more personal mission, moved to a country where she didn't speak the language, survived cancer, and somehow still found time to write a book on marketing. Katia, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Nikhil. It's an honor to be with you today.
Well, I'm going to dive right into our conversation. Now, you've had to start over more than once, right? First leaving southern Italy for Milan, where you faced bias as a woman in corporate Italy. Later moving to Munich, where you had to rebuild your life and career with, in a new language and culture. So when you look back now, what do those reinventions tell you about yourself that you couldn't have known at the time?
Well, first of all, that when I really, really want something, I'm available to work hard and pay the price for it. And secondly, that sometimes I'm too naive and I undervalue the consequences of my dreams. And I see things a bit more easier than they are in the reality.
Yeah, and talk to me a little bit about when you moved to Milan and what that was like as, being a woman in the corporate world. That was something.
Well, I didn't. When I moved to Milan, I wanted to get the success. So I thought Milan is almost Hollywood in Italy. I wanted to have a great career. I finished university and I wanted to have the corporate world. And I thought, okay, so after university, you enter the corporate world and it's done. But the very first move and the first year I was there, I entered a startup basically, and I didn't know at the time that it was not a big corporation, but it was a startup within the corporation. And after 1 year, I realized that the startup was not successful. I needed to leave the corporate, so the startup, and start all over again in a new company. And I didn't have time to look for another job because Milan is extremely expensive, and I ended up serving coffee to a bunch of of corporate people, all men. None of them had a degree, and they just needed an assistant, an office assistant. They didn't even know in the IT world what I could do with a marketing degree.
Right.
So it was the first reality facing moment.
Yeah, and I sometimes feel, that those are the things that propel you forward, right? Because without those, and like you said, even the hardest points in my life, I felt have sort of given me steam in knowing that I could overcome them, right? So those are the ones I hold on to more than the easy parts of my life. Have you found that too? Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Because it's the stamina I got that time, the suffering saying, no, marketing can really do the difference to you. And trying to find my why every single day brought me to understand how I could use my marketing knowledge for them so that they could buy in my ideas. And I found it that there were unused marketing funds that they had. They could still use for sales activities, for many things. They could improve their own revenues. And when I proposed them, hey, you say you don't need marketing, but there are unused marketing funds. And I am the only person that knows how to create marketing programs so that you can use them. Maybe I can be of some help other than serving coffees. Of course, I didn't say like that. Allowed me to be the marketing manager within 1 year in that function and get a personal office, what I could never imagine 1 year prior to that. And this showed me for the first time again that if you really want something and you are ready to work for it and humbly accepting to do a step back and not a linear path toward your dream, uh, it it can be possible.
You're right, but I think one of the sort of what do you call it? Double standards I've come across each time is that there with men are given the opportunity before they've proven themselves, right? Women have to prove themselves before they're given the opportunity, and I find that seems to be consistent with people I've spoken in the podcast all over the world.
Yes, yes. And this was the first time I started thinking that being a woman could be not exactly an advantage in the corporate world, unless even in the tech world, because I always liked somehow tech. I was programming my own games when I got the first Commodore, and I was so keen of being in tech that I didn't realize that being the only woman could be even a disadvantage. I started seeing it while I realized, okay, everyone is a man here in this room. Everyone, so I'm the only one having a degree, and still I'm serving coffee to every one of them. And still I'm the only person everyone at the client asks to serve a coffee if they see me around the office.
Yeah, I know. It's funny. I had a friend who was on the podcast too, who was a senior creative director, and she made a big presentation at a client thing. And then, they broke for lunch, and the men in the room just looked at her and said, "Are you ordering lunch yet?" I mean, she was the person who presented this multi-million-dollar campaign, but automatically all the men turned to assume that she would order the lunch, right? So yeah, it is very unfair. It's still, very much like that. Now, you spent a number of years at Microsoft then, right? And then you went on to Amazon and Workday. And from the outside, that looks like an extraordinary corporate career. But you told me that during the pandemic at Amazon, instead of working less, everyone was working like crazy, right? And that's when burnout hit. So could you talk a little bit about what was happening underneath all that external success that the CV never shows?
Yes. The fact that, for example, in Amazon, we were 1,250,000 employees. And I had a global role at the time. And every time I needed to find the right person, it took lots of time, because you have to imagine I had several clients and global clients, and all of the several clients had multiple products selling on Amazon. And I was responsible for Alexa at that time, and Alexa on specific devices. So I needed to find out every time which were the internal colleagues working on that client, on that product, in a specific region, and bring them to agree on a specific campaign with Alexa. So it was already a lot of time. And since everyone was at home, it was okay for me working 24 hours almost, because my husband was at home and not traveling all the time. My two kids were at home studying from home, and I didn't have to organize the usual 3 babysitters, the usual calendars, and so on. So I worked crazy, but still during the pandemic, it went well because I had everyone at home. As soon as the pandemic started, so everyone started traveling again, started working normally again, and we needed to go back to the office, it was for me too much. I could not cope with two little kids, my husband always away, and tons and tons of products required because everyone was buying on Amazon at that time,
Yeah.
since the normal shops, the retail shops were closed. And I got a burnout, realizing it's too much for me. I didn't know I had a burnout. I was crying, taking pills to sleep at night because it was I was thinking that I could not stop, and I was making lots of mistakes since I could not focus.
Yeah, I know and it happens very quietly, right? It's an insidious thing. You don't notice it. It's so easy to do. And I mean, I guess in some ways in solopreneurship, that's also the danger, right? Because the lines are blurred. But I think in the corporate world, especially, people have this brilliant stuff on their CV, but nobody talks about the other side of the fence that you were just describing, right?
Yes, and on when you are in corporate, you are more in a reactive way. So
Yeah.
you get stuff to accomplish, and it's not. We as an entrepreneur, we need to take action. We are not in a reactive way all the time because we need to start activities. We need to do our administration, the marketing. When you are in a reactive way, you slow down. It's like a car that has less and less and less fuel. It goes, so you have the illusion that you are still driving, but you are not in control anymore.
Yeah, that's true. You're not in charge, and you're sort of a slave to the corporate, engine, if you like the way you
Mhm.
described it. That's true. So you mentioned that when the cancer diagnosis came, it forced you to ask a question most of us only ever ask in theory, right? You said, if I'm not going to live that much longer, what do I actually want to do with my life? So when you finally sat with that, what did the answer look like? Was it immediate clarity, or was it more like a slow negotiation with yourself?
Well, immediate clarity would be a dream, but it was a burning, so a rebirth, and it was painful as a birth, and it was long as as a birth. So because I realized, okay, um, I want to transform this into an opportunity for me. I don't want to get pity and say, oh, me myself. It's something that I have unlocked. Also because I knew already, since my father had died of cancer at the age of 38, and many of other my so relatives, I knew that life is already precious, and we need to live every single day at full and with a legacy that it's important to me. And so I realized, okay, it's now, and now after a burnout, now I need to take my life in my hands and give also my kids a good example and a model they can follow by themselves. And I realized, okay, I don't want to be just in marketing anymore, because I want to support people. I want to support people preventing burnout, thinking that their value is much bigger than the job title they have, the company they work in, everything that I have read already, but living it was different. Being in a hospital and seeing so many people around me that mm, they needed to survive. They were not thinking at the forecast or the how much we are selling, but they are saying how many more days I'm going to live. Changed my perspective completely, and I decided, okay, I want to do something. I need to do something that resonates with my life. And all my life, I've been volunteering. I've been creating communities. I've been creating programs for women and for diversity. So if I've been doing this the past 30 years, it means there is something. So I took a coach, I took a therapist, and I said, okay, it means I need to do something with people, because people are my energy and people are what I focus on. Um, I I'm not available I don't want to study 5 years psychology. I don't want to study 5 years art therapy that it's required in Germany. Maybe the quickest way could be for me to take a coaching training, which still it's almost 1 year, and start seeing, how do I relate to people? How can I support people? And while I started this, I realized that it was a healing process for me too. Because when you coach other people, people mirrors your blind spots, your limiting beliefs. And you realize that most of your thoughts or your beliefs are not true. So I had to believe, okay, I'm a woman and I'm always, so I have I'm not good enough imposter. And I realized after coaching so many men that it's a human belief or limiting belief. It's not a man or a woman, but it's a human. And like that, many other beliefs that I had, and I can learn still today a lot. And so I love my job because I can give and take lessons every single client and every single hour.
Yeah, no, I admire your courage, and I appreciate you sharing that. And there are a couple of things you said, which I've had other guests who've been through similar experiences. They all say they find a kind of clarity that we sort of never stop and give ourselves permission to look for, right? Otherwise, until something tragic or difficult like that happens. So, and you're right about the other thing too. I think men just don't talk about it, right? They've been taught to hide that part. It's not that we don't suffer from imposter syndrome and all the same things and the insecurities. We just never discuss it honestly, I feel. So I think, that's a whole different podcast, but I think that the male ego is the problem here compared to women who are much more open and much more. And I think that's why they make better leaders for the most part. So.
Yeah, so I believe we should cooperate together and bring together on the table dealing with emotions and overcoming fears. Because at the end, at least I speak for myself, the fear of not being good enough or not being what happens if people discover that I'm not perfect, which seems stupid and banal, but it's not. I can learn from my husband, for example, who has been always supportive, to things to let it go, not being always in control. That done is better than perfect. That everyone is going to judge anyway. So we are not in control so much of what other things, but we are in control of how do we feel and how do we want to set boundaries and what we want to learn at the end.
And the decisions we make are entirely in our hands, right? Including the consequence of that. But I appreciate, and I love what you said about sort of being a mirror, right? Because if we could all be that for each other, then we all learn from each other, and there's value for everyone, right? Being vulnerable and just sort of being honest is the word I would say, because we're all human and we all go through the same things, irrespective of where we live or what language we talk or, what culture we imbibe.
Yes, and being honest sometimes it's about the stories we tell to ourselves. Many times we believe so much in the stories we tell to ourselves that we close doors that unconsciously we close doors in front of us and we don't realize it, thinking that it's not us, it's no, I'm better than, and or I don't want to talk to that person because blah blah. But at the end, the door that we close is our, and pay attention to our stories has been one of the biggest learnings I've learned by coaching others.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's even harder now with social media, right? Because people tend to show you only what the cherry pick stuff. So you're also sitting at this barrage of everyone out there behaving like they're absolutely perfect. They don't have any insecurities. They don't have any problems. They're 110% confident, which we know is not true. But I think it's just made it a lot harder to be. And I think it's more necessary is, I guess, where I was going for all of us to, show that vulnerability. And I think it will, resonate with people versus the polished, confident people. I think people are now attracted to the ones who are honest about, and that's part of the reason for this podcast is unfiltered. I want people to know that, we're on the same journey and we go through the same ups and downs. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just part of being human and you work through it like you just talked about.
Yes, and at the same time, it took me a lot of time and courage to put my face on LinkedIn almost every day because I didn't like at all putting my face there and writing so openly about what I think and what I want. I used to create communication for companies, so I'm writing only in the company guidelines and so on. And when I finally decided to start posting, and I also wrote the book, um, it was for me interesting to hear that some men found my book too much for them. They said, "Hey, I thought it's just a marketing book. Uh, you don't need to write so much personal stuff there. It's you will lose lots of clients because you will feel or appear weak." And it was interesting for me to know because the very first fear I had was to appear weak when I started my new job and when I started writing on LinkedIn. And then so I got so many people telling me, yeah, I also had this. Yeah, I also had a burnout. Yeah, I also suffered this. I also had difficulties in my team. And I lost my fear of putting my face there through LinkedIn. And now hearing that, yeah, but you can lose clients, so because you may seem too weak for executives, too weak for the clients you have now, I realized, wow, it's another lesson for me. I cannot be liked by anyone, which was also anyway one of my difficulty. And I realized I could be a people pleaser because I loved supporting everyone in the office, taking on me every possible um, stuff to do because it feels good when someone is grateful to you. It feels good when you can help someone else, and then you realize, okay, what happens if you don't? So someone doesn't like you.
Yeah. No, and I have a slightly different take on that, right? Which is, I think that's part of the solopreneur journey. I've had to get over that too, putting yourself out there in a way that's vulnerable. But I do believe that you have to find your tribe, right? So the people who said that are not your clients. They're never meant to be your clients. Maybe someday they will, but they're not the kind of people you need to attract, right? You will find your tribe based on your authentic self. So I would always say stick with that. And and that's something I've also sort of learned the hard way is not taking things personally, right? Because, like you said a minute ago, and actually the question I was going to ask you next, I was going to shift to brand building, is talking about, that for years you spent building visibility, positioning for partner programs, go-to-market strategies for like major tech brands. And then now you've had to suddenly market yourself, right? So what I wanted to delve into a little more was it easier because of what you did, or was it harder because this was so much personal? And you sort of touched on that a little bit. But can you talk a little bit more about that in terms of the process of writing the book and how that felt for you, putting yourself out there, like you said, before you got the criticism from a few people?
For me, it was very hard because I had in my mind, okay, you're a marketeer, so it should be super easy for you to market yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not the case. It's extremely difficult. First of all, because when you join a company, the company have done the job already. They know who is their target group. They know which is their niche. They know they built lots and lots, above all the companies I've been working for, tons of marketing money to create awareness, to positioning, and so on. When you start from scratch. You don't know where to start from. You want to serve everyone instead of saying, I only want to focus on a niche. And you don't even know which is your niche. Above all as a coach, because I know, okay, I want to work with corporate people, but corporate people is half of the population. It's not a marketing positioning. A website, the basics. So everything has been extremely difficult for me. And also, I didn't want to sell myself. It's easier to sell other people, to sell products, to and not put yourself and say, okay, I am my product, I am my services, and my service, and it's difficult, but it's also a nice process because you realize you're free. You're free to be yourself. You don't have to convince someone else that the product is good. You say, let's start a conversation and accept that you are not for everyone.
Yeah, exactly. And I actually have a pet phrase that I always say: you can't write the label from inside the bottle, because I've been through the same thing. I mean, I teach marketing, and I do it. I get paid to do this for my expertise, and still, it was so hard to do for myself. I couldn't do it. I had to go, and what I realized is that you have to sort of pull yourself out of the bottle. And I've gone, and I have angels and truth tellers, and I go to them, I talk to them, I interview my clients afterwards to understand what worked, what didn't. You just have to do that. And I think that's part of the learning process. And the other thing I always tell people is don't niche early, right? Because to your point, you don't know when you start. You have to
Mm-hmm.
start sort of broad, kind of like, just like you found out from your book, you now have a better sense of who your clients are and who they're not, right? The naysayers are not your clients. If they're not willing to be vulnerable, they probably are not coachable. You know what I mean? If their defenses come up that quickly, just hearing your story, then at least at this point, right? Maybe at some point down the road they will be, but and again,
Yeah.
you can't take you can take a horse to water, right? Like people often ask me, if someone doesn't believe in building their brand, well, how do you convince them? And I'm like, I don't. That's not my job. I put it out there what I do, and if you see the value, you come to me. If you don't, that's okay. There's
Mm-hmm.
no problem with that. So, and I think that's just part of the process of the solopreneur journey.
Yes, and also I remember, so I like Simon Sinek a lot. I've read his book and I watched his videos. And one thing that I didn't like at all while I was working, I've always been a networker. So I love connecting with other people. I love creating community. I love mingle with other people. And every time I was in these big corporations, I realized that when I said my name, okay, when I said the company I work for, people were suddenly interested in who I am, what I do, can we connect, and so on. And I was always frustrated because I say, hey, why it's more important the company I work for than me as a person? And when I saw after layoffs so many people that were super high in ranking that suddenly were my friends or were my so could connect and mingle, and I realized it's only an illusion. The job level, the company is an illusion. At the end, we are connected as human beings. And if I realize it maybe earlier than someone else, um, it helps a lot understanding as an entrepreneur that, yeah, some people can be attracted by a name and a job title. I want to attract the others.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And there is almost like, and maybe I'll coin a phrase of this corporate mourning period, right? Because I went through the same thing. I had so many people who reach out to me and want to take me here and do this. The moment I left Ogilvy and my corporate title disappeared, those people wouldn't even pick up my calls or return my emails, right?
I mean, suddenly. And it is a bit of a rude awakening, but then it's empowering when you realize you are not your title, right? You are so much more than your title. All your skills, your experience, your worldview, you take with you. That's not wrapped in any title. And, that is freeing. But as you said, there is a process of where you suddenly realize, wow, these people only cared about my title and not about me. And then now I'm like, I don't need those people. They're not my people. And that's okay too, right? It's not a good or bad thing. It's just the way things are. But I think that's part of the process.
Yes.
The other thing I wanted to ask you was as you start to shape your brand, now we talked about the niche and clients, but when you have so many threads of experience, like you mentioned a minute ago, tech, coaching, AI, women's leadership, transitions, team dynamics, marketing, how did you decide what belonged at the center of your brand story? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Have I decided?
Yeah. How did you decide? Oh, okay. You're still working through that. Yeah.
Yeah, because at the beginning, like many other people also, I used to compare myself with others a lot, saying, okay, I want to learn from the best. But also this is a kind of being naive, because we should never compare ourselves to others. We should just understand what I want to learn, which is the skill I want to get. When I started as a coach, I thought, okay, everyone around me comes from HR experience, or I've studied psychology, and my previous experience as marketing and sales is completely useless. So what should I say? I'm a marketeer, and that's why I can coach you well. And so I brought with me this baggage of insecurity for quite a long time, until I realized that many other coaches around me reached out to me saying, oh, I really love how you do communicate on LinkedIn. Oh, I really like what you are doing as a marketeer. Oh, I really like this. And I said, okay, just is marketing. It's not coaching. And then when clients also started coming to me because they found me on LinkedIn, because they found me in networking events, I started realizing that it's not, okay, I close one door and I open another door. Everything is like a river. It just takes another form. And I don't need to shut the door of marketing because it's another thing, but I can use what I know in marketing to empower people exactly in coaching, being them other coaches, or entrepreneur, or being them my clients. Because I did the workshop, and one client of mine told me, hey, I found the workshop extremely interesting. Can you do it with me? And I said, hey, but you are already my client. But she said, yes, but you are not teaching me marketing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I love the river analogy, right? I haven't heard it described that way. And you're right. And that's one of the reasons also we were just talking about not niching early, right? Because I always say you don't get those signals if you narrow too quickly. And that's a perfect example of sort of getting a signal and then figuring out how to make it complementary to your offering, right? And I think that's important too, is not just jumping at different things every time someone says, oh, this works. But I love how you sort of wrapped it now into the focus of coaching, and you've added this as a layer, if you like, in terms of based on what you heard from the market and what your clients need, right? And that I think is really.
And also thanks to AI, because I still keep all my passion for technology and AI, and I experiment a lot with it too. So within the ICF, International Coaching Federation, we do lots of events where AI is there, AI chatbot, AI companies. And then I realized, okay, how can I use AI for me as a coach so that I can serve better my clients? And so I started taking the transcript of all of my clients, of course, with their signature, of course, with their agreement, of course, in a protected environment like Copilot. And I asked to analyze, first of all, how I am performing against the ethical values and the ethical standards. Which are the main topics my clients bring to coaching, which are my client's profile. And then I took these not only to send better follow-ups to my clients using exactly their words, because I count more on my presence while I'm coaching than registering everything there, exactly what they are saying, and also creating my content management.
Yeah.
So uh, using AI empowers me much more as an entrepreneur. And so again, I can combine my marketing passion, my technology passion, and my passion to support people in a way that 2 or 3 years ago I would never imagined.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I do something very similar where I actually take, because ultimately I always say your messaging should be a mirror for the client, right? They need to see themselves in the messaging. And what better way to do that than actually playing back the language that they give us? And you're right, in a session, even I'm focused on the client and the problem, and I'm not paying attention to that. But yes, using, I tell everyone, get permission, keep the transcripts, and then mine it for that messaging and marketing gold, right? Because that's
Mm-hmm.
really what you're looking to get. Now, I'm curious though now. So coaching has become a very saturated category, right? There are lots of coaches out there. Now you're navigating complex transitions, team conflicts with senior executives. So, with so many coaches using very similar language, is that sort of your secret sauce? How do you get them to see you as more than just another coach and sort of touch on, oh, wow, Katya's got the exact flavor of, what my chaos, for example? Is that how you do it, using sort of playing back what you were just describing?
When I get this question, and I get it quite often, above all when I meet former colleagues of mine, and I said, "Oh no, another coach. Oh, you too."
Right.
I ask back the question: how do you choose your restaurant when you want to go out for dinner? There are so many restaurants out there.
Yeah, true.
How do you choose one? Because you see the reviews,
Yeah,
or you have been there in the past and you have had a very nice experience. You ask someone you know and that has
trust.
similar tastes and
Yeah,
trust someone else. And still there are opening restaurants every day everywhere. We have enough restaurants, but
yeah.
you are keen to try a new one, or you go back to yours. There will never be enough, too many restaurants on this world, and there will never be too many coaches on this world. Everyone has the opportunity to choose the best for himself.
Yeah, no, I love that analogy. You're right, because it is, and this is even more intimate, right? So usually, so even if you find someone and it resonates, you will still typically look for a second opinion,
Mhm.
whether it's a review or a friend or someone else, or even a connection who's connected to you. So that's true. So tell me something though. You wrote this book on marketing, right? Marketing yourself forward, and you also mentioned to me that it's still continuous trial and error, right? In terms of design, branding, messaging. So, what part of your coaching business do you think people still don't fully understand until they actually experience working with you?
Mm, Many people still, I work with coaching platforms, and
Yeah,
I still have people that have never tried a coaching program before. So they don't know what to expect. They have an idea of me teaching them something, or um, mm, learning something new, but they don't know what. And after the very first session, every one of them says, "Oh wow, everyone should have a coaching." Because coaching is like philosophy. So it seems something too complicated. I love philosophy. Too complicated, too far away from them. And everything has to do with questions.
yeah,
Where are you going? What is important for you? So it's stop and reflecting on what you really want and who you really are. It's something we are not used anymore. And having that space in our life, understanding, oh wow, I have the power of deciding where I want to go and not always react to everything happening to me. And above all, if I'm not well where I am, but I don't know where I want to go. How can I get up and stop being frustrated?
Yeah, true. And Ruth described it as sort of the ice cream problem, right? How do you describe ice cream to someone who's never tasted it? And
Mm-hmm.
that's really what the essence is, right? I love that analogy because it was like, and that's why I'm a big believer in sort of like almost like free taster sessions, right? Because unless you experience it, you don't really know. Words can't really describe what you just talked about. And even
Mm-hmm.
sessions with, brand building, people are like, okay, I walk away with X, Y, Z, but what does that actually mean, right? So no, I think that's a really important component for a business that relies on that human experience, right? To really get what the value, so to speak, because we're not
Mm-hmm.
selling widgets. So now you're running a coaching practice in 3 languages, right? Across multiple platforms and time zones. So I'm
Yes.
curious about the mechanics of that. What does a typical week look like for you?
Well, ask my daughters because they see me constantly in calls. But yeah, I'm an enthusiast about diversity, so I'm so happy to work with people in Azerbaijan, in Japan, in Italy, in Africa. I love working with people of different backgrounds and different cultures, and that's why I seek also this diversity of opinions. And I think the more diverse people I can coach, the more I can learn, and the more I can see how human beings around the globe share many, many, many similarities.
Yeah, and how do you manage the time zones though? So are you on calls at crazy hours? Do you find, or you? Yeah,
Well, the reason why I decided also to become a coach and work remotely is because I love traveling. And since the kids have many school days, I can travel when they have holidays, and I can use the different time zones, those zones on my advantage. I've been coaching from Thailand, Cambodia, Paris. I will be in Japan next week, and I will coach there too. Of course, I adjust the time zones, but so before you, I had another American client, and I love it. So apart from coaching during the night, which I'm not available anymore, like my Amazon time when I needed to work with China, but yeah, I'm flexible, and I learned now how to take breaks, how to recharge, what is important to me, and when I know I will coach people in later in the evening, I take breaks during the day. I stay with the kids in the afternoon, and I try to put the calls when they are already in bed.
yeah. So you have clear boundaries. It sounds like, unlike the Amazon days when there were none. And I love that you sort of wrap the passion for travel into the work, right? That's awesome. That's a great way to do it. And that's, I think, one of the things we don't necessarily, take advantage of, is because one of the greatest things about being a solopreneur is you can design your own schedule, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's entirely up to you. You're not beholden to some corporate calendar and timeline. So I love that. So there's one other thing you touched on, where you use coaching platforms, right? You've built your business using coaching platforms. Now, a lot of solopreneurs assume the only path to clients is, content, referrals, or cold outreach. So I'm curious, what should people understand about finding the places where buyers are already looking for help, right? I feel like solopreneurs tend to overlook those.
Yeah, I did I searched before I started work, so my training. What's the in terms of reaching my client, which is not only acquiring new clients by myself. And now there are many new coaching platforms that know that with so many layoffs, uncertainty, and change, people need to have a sparring partner, thinking partners, and coaching is becoming more popular than ever. And that's why there are big platforms that win big clients. And when they win big clients, they have also the need of having many, many coaches behind them. In different countries, in different languages, with different backgrounds. And this is an advantage for us as coach, since they, of course, we need to compromise. The compromise is of course, the honorary. You get much less than you get from private clients, but the platform does the job. The selling, the invoicing, and all the administration part, and the platform part. So there are so many platforms out there, and you need to get some such standards, of course. You cannot think, okay, I do a course and then I enter a platform. Thanks God, at least the platforms check the standards, check the certifications, and want to be sure that the ethical standards and the knowledge is there before they took you and took you in their platform, which is not the case of consumer.
Yeah. And also you tested, right? I think I remember you telling me you started with like 120 and you've narrowed down to 20. So you really sort of found the ones that are a good fit, like you said, in terms of the standard, the level, quality, all of that. But I think
Yes.
the big lesson here is that you don't have to do everything on your own, right? A lot of solopreneurs starting out feel like I've got to build my entire business on my own. I think it's a great example of sort of find the watering holes where your clients are already going and figure out how you can become sort of part of that network. Like you said, now there's obviously some compromise because if someone else is doing the selling,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to get the same rate, but it's still, a client is, and you kind of figure out the balance then, right? So I think
Yeah,
that's
and I
really well.
write about it also on LinkedIn many times. I write not only to the clients, check if your company offers this opportunity, because many people don't even know that the company already have an agreement with a coaching platform. They don't even know that the companies can support them. And I say, check if your company has a coaching platform supporting you. And then, so you can at least taste coaching. There are so many good colleagues there. Take one of the good colleagues that are there already. You don't need to go out and check by yourself. And then I try to communicate to my colleagues, there is a list of platforms. Reach them out. Look if they are their values or their clients resonates with who you are and who you are looking for. So let's support each other as much as we can, because I believe that there is enough for anyone. Since I also cooperate with the International Coaching Federation, I believe that coaching skills can be extremely valuable also for people that don't want to be coached in their life. But they can use coaching skills in their own companies, which are absence of judgment and open mind. Put yourself in the other person's shoes.
Yeah, true. Those skills are never wasted, right? And the corporate world doesn't teach those to you. I've heard so many stories of star performers who get promoted, who are really good individual performers, but then the moment they have to manage a team, they've never been taught how to do that. So I agree. So one other question I'd love to ask you is, now you touched on this a little bit in terms of sales transcripts, and sort of that's more inward. But you describe AI as your enabler, I think was the word you used on your LinkedIn profile, which is a very deliberate word. So where does it actually show up in your work, and where do you draw the line?
Well, it's so in everything I do except from a coaching session, or maybe also there if there is a transcript. So in the relationship with the client, there is only the human component there. So the expertise, the knowledge, the open mind, the presence. But everywhere, apart from the client relation, I use AI for everything. I use AI to create my content management, to invoicing, to quickly answer to emails, above all if they are in German, which is still a bit critical for me to find new topics to deal with, to do researches. What else? To reach out to other people and learn from them. How they use AI for their work? How can we automatize as much as possible, knowing that it's a statistical system?
Yeah,
Never forgetting that it's just statistics. It's not another person helping you.
yeah, you're right. It doesn't have judgment or experience. It uses probability to answer. And I agree with you. I use AI for everything too, but I realize I do it to get all the tasks that I don't need to be spending time on, so I can focus the human part more on client interaction, right? That's the piece. It's
Exactly.
never going to replace you're never going to get my AI avatar on this podcast talking to you on a pre-call or any of that part will always stay human. But everything else you don't need. So you're sort of freeing up your time to focus on the work. That's the way I think about it, that you do so with clients.
Yes, and also studying how other people use AI. For example, I see with my kids that they use AI much more than they ask human being things. And this scares me a bit, but I need to learn how other people use AI to be sure that also my clients can be better leaders. In a sense that I also have some VPs that they have in their team AI agents. And sometimes they think, okay, this is an agent, it's like an employee. But it's not, because so emotions make a huge difference if a project can be successful or not. Because human has the capacity of, has the experience behind. It's not a predictive
Yeah.
analysis. Humans can also sense that there is something that the other person is not telling, that there is an uncertainty there, that what AI doesn't. So, of course, AI can be extremely valuable, but be aware that an AI will never advise you that something is going to be completely wrong. AI many times doesn't challenge you at all. AI can support you, but rarely will get in contrast with other people and generate innovation.
Mm-hmm.
And AI reproduces biases anyway. So while you need the human intervention to create a human environment in a team.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think it can ever substitute for the human part of it. But and maybe there's another podcast episode on how younger people are using it now, because I've seen a lot of data on how they're using it as to substitute human connection, right? So they're using it for as a therapist, they're using it as friendship, they're using it to date. But that's a whole nother, yeah. And I hope we sort of deal with that, unlike social media, which sort of went off the rails. But and maybe we'll do another episode on that. So if we were to grab coffee 3 years from now, Katia, what do you want to achieve? What's different? What have you built? Who have you become?
Well, the first is I really love to be still on the planet in 3 years, and I would love to create what I wanted to when I started doing coaching. So my idea would be to create something rooted, so a sort of platform where many professionals in the direction of employees' well-being services come together. And I can offer companies these 360 services for their people, so that their people can perform at best, feeling human, having everything around them that supports them to be their best. This is my dream, so my vision. for example, I have my ex-manager that decided to leave the corporate world too, and took a certification as a sport massage trainer. And so I always envision, okay, we can offer yoga, massage, coaching, psychotherapy, sport, everything people need to be happy at work and to be their best at work, knowing that the company is investing on them.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I wish you all the best with your treatment, and I hope to see you in
Thank
3
you.
years too. If you had to offer one piece of advice to someone wanting to start this solopreneur journey, what would you tell them?
To be patient. Because I'm an impatient person. I love I love speed. I love quick. I love working like crazy and getting things done. But entrepreneurship has its own time frames. So you need to learn so many things before you are ready to get the income you want, before you have the things as you wish. So your branding, your customer base, right networking. That it takes time, and you can be the best of the best of the best. Still, it takes time to to create what you want, and that's the quote, Rome wasn't built in a day. For entrepreneurship is exactly the right quote.
Yeah, no, I love that. I'm glad you said that because it also counters that nonsense on social media, right? That you go from 0 to 130 days and there are all these playbooks and things where you quit your job 1 week and next week you're lying on a beach and money's rolling in. It does not work like that. And it should not work like that because that, I think instant success or easy success, I think teaches you nothing. I always say if your overnight success took less than 10 years, it's the wrong kind of success. So I echo that sentiment. So,
Yeah, thank you.
is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't covered?
Well, just a bit of the topic of my book, which is being more visible. Because many people come to coaching and say, yeah, I didn't get my promotion. I'm struggling to make my voice heard. I haven't landed my own job, so the job I wanted. And the question I always ask is, how clear is it to your manager that you aim for that promotion? How clear is for the hiring manager of that division or that company that you are there? How visible are you? And many people think, yeah, well, my job speaks for itself. Or I send a CV. What should I do? Should I go and meet personally the hiring manager? Yes, if possible, yes. So you need to be there where the people you want are there. Because if you are not visible, and being visible doesn't mean being the one-man show or the people on stage, the person on stage, and the mega extroverted person. It just means communicate. Try a way to get closer to your goal and communicate it clearly and with impact and respect and value for the other person.
Yeah, no,
And
I agree, and you're right. And I remember my father once telling me a long time with that generation was like, keep your head down, do your work, and everyone will realize it. But things have changed. You have to advocate for yourself, like you said, right? It's not about having a megaphone, but being clear about, because a lot of times we have these conversations in our own head and we assume the other person will just figure it out, right? So I think that's really good advice.
thank you.
So that brings us to our rapid fire round. So I'm going to just throw 5 questions at you. So you've lived in Italy and Germany. What's one German habit you've adopted and one Italian habit you refuse to let go of?
Okay, the German habits I adopt, it's funny because Germans plan their appointment months in advance. Even an ice cream together, it's planned months in advance. And so when I go to Italy, I communicate 2 or 3 months in advance with my friends saying, hey, do we take an appointment on that day? And I said, it's in 2 months. Yes, but I will be there and I want to be sure to see you. Yeah, we meet each other and you don't need a confirmation from me that in 2 months I will be there for you. And so they joke about me on this. And one Italian habit I refuse to let go is about wearing white socks and Birkenstocks.
I love that. So, if your corporate career had a warning label, what would it say?
Don't fake. So I don't like the motto "fake until you make it."
Yeah, no, I agree, and I think everyone should hear that. What is the most unglamorous part of your workday that no one ever sees on LinkedIn?
Oh, me getting crazy with all the calendars of different platforms that don't synchronize with my calendar, and I get tons of people to communicate, can we adjust this appointment or this or that? And my husband says, there must be an app, there must be a solution with your problem. You cannot get crazy every single day. And yeah.
And we add the time zones to that too, right? Between
Of
Japan
course.
and Germany and Spain and the US. Okay. And I'm sure there is an app for that. So a song that describes your coaching style.
I like to move it. I like to move it.
Yeah, you said you're impatient, right? That's good. I love that. So what's one task AI can happily take over forever and one task you would never let it touch?
Administration can take over forever. So accounting and administration. And AI can never touch an hug. I'm an hugging people. So my kids know me for hugging people around, and I'm sure AI will never do that.
Yeah, well, let's hope not. They're already trying to put it into robots, right?
Well, it will be a bit more rigid.
Yeah, I agree. I'm a hugger too, so I'm with you on that. So let's champion that together. Well, Katia, it's been so much fun chatting with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story so
Thank you,
openly and
Nikhil.
honestly.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
There are a few valuable lessons I want to share from my conversation with Katia for anyone building a solo business. First, even marketeers struggle to market themselves. You heard me right. Katia has decades of marketing experience. I have decades of marketing experience. Yet both of us admitted just how difficult it was and how much we struggle to market ourselves. Why, you may ask? Because when you're marketing a company, there's distance. But when you are the business, that distance evaporates. You're not just shaping the message, you're actually sitting, standing, and living inside it, which is what makes it so much harder. So if you're a coach or solopreneur feeling frustrated that you just can't quite get your messaging right, don't look at that as a personal failure. That is a proximity issue. As I always say, you can't read the label inside the bottle. Now, your own brand is the one thing you cannot see clearly because you are too close to it. And the answer isn't to try harder on your own. It's actually to pull yourself out of the bottle, go talk to clients, find peers, find a mentor, find a brand coach, a truth teller who'll reflect back what they hear when you talk about your work, right? It's not what you think about your work, it's how other people receive it. Now, the clarity you're chasing lives outside your head, not inside it. The second lesson is this: you don't have to build your business from scratch when you can fish in someone else's pond. What I mean is there's this myth out there that you have to build your customer base from zero. You don't. Katia tested over 100 coaching platforms and then finally narrowed it down to 20 where she found her right fit clients and platforms that felt like it was a mutual fit with her values. Now, as solopreneurs, we often fall into that trap of thinking we need to do this the hard way. Somehow that's more authentic. It isn't. It's just more effort for less reward. So stop trying to invent the market. Look for platforms, for groups, for networks where your ideal buyers are already hanging out, and then ask, how can I become a trusted part of that ecosystem? The third lesson is about visibility. Katia talked about this in the context of coaching, but I think it's something every solopreneur needs to hear. Now, visibility is not about becoming the loudest person in the room or becoming something you have to perform for other people. It means communicating clearly and consistently so the people looking for you and for your expertise are find you more easily, right? A lot of coaches still carry the old belief, keep your head down, do good work, and people will find you. But that's not true anymore. In our fast paced, distraction filled, fragmented world, the truth is they probably won't. So think of it this way: visibility is not vanity. If you want the right clients, the right referrals, the right opportunities, you have to make your value easier to see. So whether that's on LinkedIn, on your podcast, through your newsletter, or the way you show up in a networking conversation, the channel matters less than the clarity. And the last lesson is one I love. Patience is not passivity. Katia said solopreneurship has its own time frames, and she's absolutely right. Now, there's so much noise out there, especially on social media, telling people that they can go from zero to $100,000 in their bank account in 60 or 90 days through some fancy framework or CRM platform. That's bullshit. Building a real business, one that has staying power, never works that way. It takes time to test and refine your message, time to understand who you actually help, time to build proof, time to become known for your particular expertise. So try things, put yourself out there, use AI, experiment, but find platforms, partners, and places where your buyers are already looking. And don't confuse urgency with impatience. The point is not to do things randomly, it's to look for the signals. Who leans in when you describe your work? What problems do people keep coming back to you for? Remember, patience doesn't mean waiting for clarity to arrive or appear. It means staying in motion long enough for the market to show you what's actually working. So my challenge to you this week is to run your own language audit, inspired by Katia's AI workflow. Take the raw transcripts from your last 3 client sessions or sales calls, obviously get permission and anonymize them, then feed them into AI and ask, what are the words and phrases my clients use to describe the problem they're trying to solve? Thanks for listening to Unfiltered Solopreneur. If you want the exact prompt I use to run the client language audit, I'll share it with you. I call it the sales call goldmine. It's the same prompt I use to extract the verbatim language my clients use and the exact phrases I test in my marketing. You'll find the download link for the prompt in the show notes. Until next time, keep breaking free from the corporate grind. And remember, your story is your most powerful asset. Live solo or die corporate.